Hag Sameach, welcome back for the third light of Hanukkah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav litzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam She'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim ha'em v'azman hazeh. One moment, I'm going to move the candles out of the way. Continuing with Isaac Bashevis Singer's stories from The Power of Light. It happened about 10 years ago in Brooklyn, New York. All day long, a heavy snow was falling. Toward evening, the sky cleared and a few stars appeared. A frost set in. It was the 8th night of Hanukkah, and my silver Hanukkah lamp stood on the windowsill with all the candles burning. It was mirrored in the window pane, and I imagined another lamp outside. My wife, Esther, was frying potato pancakes. I sat with my son David at the table and played dreidel with him. Suddenly, David cried out, "Papa, look!" And he pointed to the window. I looked up and saw something that seemed unbelievable. Outside on the windowsill stood a yellow-green bird watching the candles. In a moment, I understood what had happened. A parakeet had escaped from its home somewhere and flown out into the cold street, landing on my windowsill, perhaps attracted by the light. A parakeet is native to a warm climate and cannot withstand the cold and frost for very long. So I immediately took steps to save the bird from freezing. First, I carried the Hanukkah lamp away so that the bird would not burn itself when entering. Then I opened the window and with a quick wave of my hand shooed the parakeet inside. The whole thing took only a few seconds. In the beginning, the frightened bird flew from wall to wall, hitting itself against the ceiling, and for a while it hung on the crystal prism in the chandelier. David tried to calm it. "Don't be afraid, little bird. We're your friends." Soon the bird flew toward David and landed on his head, as though it had been trained and was accustomed to people. David began to dance and laugh with joy. My wife, in the kitchen, heard the noise and came out to see what had happened. When she saw the bird on David's head, she asked, "Where did you get a bird all of a sudden?" "It came through the window, Mama." "In the middle of the winter?" "Papa saved its life." The bird was not afraid of us. David lifted his hand to his forehead, and the bird settled on his finger. Esther placed a saucer of millet and a dish of water on the table, and the parakeet ate and drank. It was the dreidel. It saw the dreidel and began to push it with its beak. David exclaimed, "Look, the bird plays dreidel." David soon began to talk about buying a cage for the bird and also giving it a name. But Esther and I reminded him that the bird was not ours. We would try to find the owners, who probably missed their pet and worried about what had happened in the icy weather. "Well, in the meantime, let's call it dreidel," said David. That night dreidel slept on a picture frame and woke us in the morning with its singing. The bird stood on the frame, its plumage brilliant in the purple light of the rising sun, shaking as in prayer, whistling, twittering, talking all the time. The parakeet must have belonged to a house where Yiddish was spoken, because we heard it say, "Zeldela, geh schlafen," which means, "Zeldela, go to sleep." And these simple words uttered by the tiny creature filled us with wonder and delight. The next day I posted a notice in the elevator of the neighborhood houses that said that we had found a Yiddish-speaking parakeet. When a few days passed and no one called, I advertised it in the newspaper. But a week went by and no one claimed the bird. Only then did dreidel become ours. We bought a large cage with all the fittings and toys a bird might want. But because Hanukkah is a festival of freedom, we resolved never to lock the cage. Dreidel was free to fly around the house whenever he pleased. 9 years passed, and Dreidel was still with us. We became more attached to him from day to day. In our house, Dreidel learned scores of Yiddish and Hebrew words. David taught him to sing a Hanukkah song, and there was always a wooden dreidel in the cage for him to play with. When I wrote on my Yiddish typewriter, dreidel would cling to the index finger of my right hand or my left hand, jumping acrobatically with every letter that I wrote. Esther often joked that dreidel was helping me to write and was entitled to half of my earnings. Our son David grew up and entered college. One winter night, he went to a Hanukkah party. He told us that he would be home late, and Esther and I went to bed early. We had just fallen asleep when the telephone rang, and it was David. As a rule, he's quiet and composed. This time, he spoke excitedly. We could barely understand what he was saying. It seemed that David had told the story of the parakeet to his fellow students at the party, and a girl named Zelda Rosen had exclaimed, "I'm Zelda. We lost our parakeet 9 years ago." Zelda and her parents lived not far from us, but they had never seen the notice in the newspaper or posted in the elevators. Zelda was now a student and friend of David's. She'd never visited before, although our son often spoke about her with his mother. We slept little that night. The next day, Zelda and her parents came to see their long-lost pet. Zelda was a beautiful and gifted girl. David often took her to the theater and to the museums. Not only did the Rosens recognize their bird, but the bird seemed to recognize its former owners. The Rosens called him Zip Zip, and when the parakeet heard them say Zip Zip, he became flustered and started to fly from one member of the family to the other, screeching and flapping its wings. Zelda and her mother cried when they saw their beloved bird alive. The father stared silently. "We have never forgotten our Zip Zip," he said. I was ready to return the parakeet to its original owners, but Esther and David argued that they could never part with dreidel. It was also not necessary because that day, David and Zelda decided to get married. So dreidel is still with us, always eager to learn new words and new games. When David and Zelda marry, they will take dreidel to their new home. Zelda has often said, dreidel was our matchmaker. Happy Hanukkah. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I will see you tomorrow for the fourth light of Chanukah. Hag Sameach.